back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilkWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another great episode. Here at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, we're all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. You know, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. It starts with each of us as an individual. So what have you done today to make your life a better life? What have you done today to make the world a better place? Making your life a better life starts with individual accountability. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, one of the great things about a bad attitude is we as individuals have the power to change it. One great way to do that, share the D-Rate the Hate podcast. Share it with your network of friends. Get them to share it. Subscribe. Leave us ratings and feedback. Always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's go. This week, I've invited my friend Dan Garscia from Fair Twin Cities back to the show. Now, if you recall, Dan and I had a conversation back in episode 102, just finding out more about each other, learning more about Fair Twin Cities, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, and that chapter here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul. So this week I had some current events on my mind, not something I would normally do on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, but they are events nonetheless that have enraged a lot of hate in a lot of people. So I thought it was relevant. I wanted to have a conversation with somebody, and I called Dan, and the conversation did not disappoint. Very good conversation. Looking forward to having you listen to it. Grateful to have you here, and with that, let's go. All right, Dan Garscia, thanks for coming back to the D-Rate the Hate podcast, man. I am so glad to have another conversation with you.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate the time and appreciate the opportunity. I very much enjoyed the conversation last time and certainly looking forward to do it again here with you.
Yeah. You know, we had such a good back and forth. We had a good conversation last time. You know, that was a really kind of an impromptu thing because neither one of us had really intended for that to be more than a conversation. It certainly didn't intend it to be an episode of the podcast, but I enjoyed it. I know you enjoyed it. We both got a lot out of it, and I think the listeners got a lot out of it. So I just wanted to have another conversation today. You know, just and this one kind of a little bit different turn for the D-Rate the Hate podcast. A lot of times, this is certainly not a political show or anything like that, but sometimes I just get this. I want to have a conversation about some current events, some things that are going on, kind of bounce my ideas and get the ideas of somebody else and somebody else that I converse well with. So that's obviously why you're back, Dan. We had that great conversation. I'm looking forward to another one today. So,
absolutely.
So the first thing that I really wanted to talk about, I want to say, just because obviously it's the D-Rate the Hate podcast, it's amazing to me how people in our country now, they see something that they don't like or that they disagree with, and man, just this disagreement brings out the crazy in people.
Right.
And one of the things, there's a couple things, obviously this past week or couple weeks, we've seen some incredible stuff, and the thing with Elon Musk taking over Twitter, buying out Twitter. And I just kind of wanted to get your feel on this because I've read some articles, and people are just, there's people that are absolutely apoplectic right now that Elon Musk is taking it over. And I mean, I've heard people say, well, free speech, we can't have uninhibited free speech because that's going to, it's going to bring, it's going to be hate speech everywhere. Dan, what is your idea of this, and what's your kind of feel? What take are you getting from, maybe the people in Fair Twin Cities or people that you interact with on this Elon Musk Twitter acquisition thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a needed conversation, but such a loaded question in itself, because I mean, I think it just covers so many different areas of what we're really kind of up against here. But I mean, ultimately it's like I've been a fan of Elon Musk, but at the same time with a little bit of a hesitancy just because he is a billionaire and, I have a hard time trusting those guys. But when I look at his past, one of the first things that really kind of got him on my radar was with the Tesla battery, and that he made it open source and made it open to everybody. Like there was no patents on it. And his whole concept and idea behind it was just, I've taken this to this level and now I wanted to open it up to the world. So other people that are maybe smarter than me or better than me in this technology can advance and move it forward. And I just thought that was amazing in itself. So I always kind of saw him as just kind of like a billionaire that I can't trust. But at the same time, when he was doing different things like that, which was so just outside of the norm, I just really saw him as kind of a visionary as to just, this is kind of the direction things are going. So, I'm going to be a part of it and I'm going to try and do it in the right way. And I think he's been fairly consistent with that when you kind of look at just how he's kind of evolved from that, even like with Neuralink and stuff like that, I have a lot of issues and concerns with some of that technology and putting brain chips and who's going to be in control of it. And are you going to be able to hack it? So that's a little concerning there for me too. So he's kind of like that mystery a little bit where I want to get behind him because he seems to be doing everything right. But at the same time, he's kind of got the money and power to really do some scary things. So, it's just, I'm trying to kind of really view as to, is he a good guy or bad guy? But I really do. But at the same time, he is coming out as the good guy. He's doing all the right things. I think he's saying a lot of the right things. And I'm trying to now just see, is he more like Iron Man or I don't know. I'm a big fan of Ayn Rand. So I see him really more as now as like John Galt. And I think he is taking that hard billionaire stance to the system, to the machine, to the government. And that's kind of where my views have changed, where I think that's something we do need as far as just instead of like, the power class, the billionaire class joining with government and essentially just kind of fascism to kind of use their money to buy the power of government to, censor us or whatever, oppress us or whatever the case is. But that's the direction we seem to be going. And then all of a sudden we finally got our John Galt was willing to kind of stand up and go Galt and stand up to the system. And that's where I really kind of see him coming around and championing things like free speech, buying Twitter, standing up against the system, because I think that's ultimately where we're going, is they see free speech as, just one of the pillars of freedom in general. And if they can take away our free speech, if they can demonize free speech, to your point, if they can basically tell us that they're taking away free speech in order to protect us, that's just another way of just saying that, well, we're going to take away your freedom. And of course, it's always under the guise of protection, but I always see it as just trying to gain more power and control. So that's kind of where I've come down to, is just, I see where the system is taking us, which is, again, just demonizing us, just putting the fear of God into us as to how and why we should fear freedom, only to be able to garner more power and control over us. So,
right. Well, I love your take on that. I love the John Galt take. I like that take. I like that take a lot. And the idea that he's taken all this money. I've read some articles on this, Dan, that where I read one just incredibly mind-numbing hit piece from somebody from over at the Atlantic that was basically saying, the right wing establishment is manipulating, him, and they're this is going to turn this whole thing into just another power structure for big business to strong arm people. And I'm like, I don't know where this person's getting this, because I've never seen that from anybody on the right. I think it's a ridiculous notion. But man, like I said, the hate, the distrust that certain people have for, people with money. I think people do forget that Elon Musk, it wasn't so many years ago, wasn't he like couch surfing and had virtually nothing? And he was like, I'm going to invent this incredibly amazing technology and then just give it all away. And miraculously, he turned into the richest man in the world within a very short period of time. Whereas you've got guys, you've got other billionaires who have been at it for, decades and decades. And yeah, they're like, I'm keeping it all for myself, and I'm going to put as much in it as I can in my pockets, and they did, and they're very, very rich. But then you got this one guy; he's kind of this crazy outlier with wild ideas, and he just yeah, I'm going to invent this. To your point about the battery and the battery technology and everything, I'm not going to patent it. I'm just going to make it, and then
Yes.
and kind of give it all away. I think Nikolai Tesla, the original Tesla,
Right.
right? I think that was kind of the inception of using that name, was because that's what
Yeah.
Nikolai Tesla wanted to do. He wanted to invent a perpetual power source, and just, I mean, I think he died poor in the gutter somewhere, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But so this idea that he's now taking this over, and that there's this certain dynamic of people that believe that, oh, that he's somehow this free speech thing. I mean, free speech, how I mean, it can't be great because people are going to be able to say what they want to say. And so that, that's bringing out the crazy in people. It's pretty wild. But yeah, I'm very interested to see how it ends up going, because
Yeah.
I was reading, he was talking about different things that he's going to do. I mean, obviously the man's brilliant. I mean,
Right.
in many ways, and yeah, I think there's a hesitancy on my part too. I mean, is he going to use that brilliance for good, or is he going to use that brilliance for bad? But you look at his past record and the things that he's done. I mean, he was actually a man of the left,
Yes. Exactly.
before he pissed off the left. Let's just
Right. Right.
put
Yes.
it that way.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and once he started doing a few things that maybe they didn't agree with, or they didn't like, or whatever, and then all of a sudden he's a target, and we see
Right.
that a lot. And to be fair, we see it a lot on both sides of the political spectrum. But the reality is once he started spouting anything that could be considered anti-left, then all of a sudden he's an enemy of the left,
Yeah.
and he couldn't possibly be doing this, no matter what he's done great so far, and no matter all the things that he's been able to do for the people of this planet, really.
Yeah. I
Once
mean,
you start to step on their toes, then
yeah.
all of a sudden you're the bad guy.
Right.
So
Because I mean, yeah, when you look at just kind of what he has done with the Tesla battery and with just electric cars, the whole whatever global warming piece, you would think they would just be championing him as like a hero in that. But to your point, I mean, you see, and that's kind of what I recognize as a pattern. And obviously goes way further back, but it's just like you look at Jordan Peterson, or just even recently with the Joe Rogan, or even like Dave Chappelle. It's like all these guys were like you said, kind of probably they've been around forever. They've been in, the public eye forever, and they've never had issues with them because they've probably been more leaning towards the left. But then all of a sudden they dare to, stand up against the leftist narrative. And it's just like all the hit pieces come out and all the slings and arrows come out, and they just do everything to possibly just diminish their credibility, their character, and just try and take these people out. And that's why both free speech is so important, is so that we can kind of stand up against the system. But also too, the one encouraging piece for me is that when they do this, it seems like, then their status even grows further. Jordan Peterson was just, some professor in Canada until he basically stood up for free speech, and now he's just a global phenomenon. And same with like Joe Rogan, not that he needed the viewership, but I mean, it's like after all the controversy with him, his membership is just ballooned because they're giving him just this notoriety that they wouldn't have otherwise, by trying to really just put a spotlight on them as bad people. But then when people actually go to listen to what they've said and what they've done for years, they're like, these aren't bad guys. These are actually probably people on the left. Why is it that they're actually trying to take them out? Why is it that they're trying to silence and discredit their credibility? It's
right. I think that's one of the things that bothers me the most about this whole thing is growing up, but I never thought of anything in terms of right or left. I didn't, I've always been an anti, I've talked about it on the podcast plenty of times, getting put in a box, and then that box being labeled and whatever. I can't stand that whole thing. it's even, all the work that I do with Braver Angels, and I love Braver Angels. I love the work that we do because we're doing awesome things to try and bridge that political divide. But even there, you hear about reds and blues and whatever, and I prefer to think of us all as people instead of, that's one of the things that I love about the work and the conversations that I've done with FAIR is, just everything is just pro-human. It's not right. It's not left. I mean, and there's it's just pro-human. There's no groups. And I love that. Another thing, and obviously I have no idea what you're going to say here, but another big thing that came out this week, Dan, and that people are just losing their minds over is the Supreme Court or the pending Supreme Court report that's going to be coming out. It was leaked. First, before we even get into what the thing was, give me your thoughts on that leak part of the whole thing.
I mean, that's just, it is, just par for the course, I think. And ultimately, why I just am always skeptical of government, because I mean, they're always going to release anything that's going to, I think, try and further divide us. And that's, I think, the true intent here. And that's what drives me crazy, especially with issues such as kind of abortion, where they're just these wedge issues that I think are put in a spotlight, especially now, where I think, it's more of a distraction than anything. But I think that's why it's essentially been leaked and brought out, is for that, as both a distraction, but again, too, so we can get back to fighting each other and hating each other. And where I think they saw us kind of all coming together, like, holy crap, inflation, war, borders, like everything's kind of collapsing around us. What are we going to do? And they needed to bring out the good trusty wedge issue to get us back fighting and hating each other again. And then
it's amazing. I mean, it is absolutely amazing. I mean, you're absolutely right when you talk about, we were coming in together in certain respects because, I mean, everybody can get behind the idea that inflation sucks. I mean, it sucks the life out of everything because everybody is paying more for gas. Everybody's paying more for groceries. Everybody's paying more. I mean, all these things. So it's something that everybody can get against. Nobody looks at inflation and says, "Oh, this is a great thing."
Right.
Despite some people, actually, I've seen people attempt to make it into something that it's not, and say, "Hey, look at these the rich business people inflating prices." But we know. I mean, I think all reasonable people know that that's not the case. Yeah. It's actually the value of our money is destroyed, and that will bring people together because that affects us all.
Exactly.
But we're coming together. The war in Ukraine, the inflation thing. So we're coming together. We're all stuck in that bucket. But then, here comes this thing out of some staffer from a Supreme Court justice that just so happens to say, you know what? I think we can slam a wedge, to use your word. We can slam a wedge right back in here and get people pissed off again. Get them hating each other. Get them mad. And then here we go. All of a sudden, the leaks and this. I thought it was interesting. Say, it's unprecedented to try to overturn what is considered settled law and this and that, blah blah blah. And I think the vast majority of people look at that and they're like, "Oh, well, it's probably true because nobody's going to look it up and whatever." But there's several hundred cases throughout history where they're like, "Okay, well, we got it wrong." Right. But we got it wrong, and we're gonna change things, and we're gonna try to make things right, and whatever. But what is unprecedented is obviously the idea that somebody from within the inner workings of the Supreme Court would leak this to the media, and then the media would put it out there, and then it would just all of a sudden be this explosion. But again, division brings out the crazy. The crazies are now they published the list of addresses and stuff of the Supreme Court justices. And, what do you think about that? I mean, that's good grief. That's disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, it is absolutely disgusting. And even when they're pushed on it, they don't even denounce it or anything. Like they basically just encourage it as to, oh, of course, we're okay with peaceful protesting. But I mean, yes, I couldn't imagine. And that's kind of some of what we had talked about last time as to, where it's like from where I come from, both either with FAIR, even with the Libertarian Party, but just trying to find people willing to get active. But that's the number one issue that I hear from both the left and the right, but mostly anybody that's willing to stand up against the machine. But why they won't stand up, or why they won't get active, or why they won't even just simply voice their opinions is because of this issue exactly right here, because they're afraid that the mob is they're going to be doxxed, they're going to get their addresses, they're going to find their places of employment, and they're going to lose their job, or even worse. So it's just unfortunately par for the course on where things are heading. And that's what drives me crazy too, is again, not being left or right, but all we kind of hear in the mainstream media is just how, the worst thing right now is the right wing, how they're so extreme and how they're so violent and how they're taking us down this road. But yet all the violence and everything seems to come directly from the left, point in case just with this situation right here. So, I mean, it is unfortunately disgusting and terrifying, but it is just par for the course. And the fact that they can't even just say, like, that's bad, we shouldn't, hand out these addresses, and we certainly shouldn't go to these people's houses, but yet they do it and they encourage it, and nobody, like, in the media will try and, like, justify of why that's a bad idea and why we shouldn't be doing it. And then of course, if anyone on the right were to do it, then it would just be, oh my God,
Oh yeah, I mean,
coming for us. And
yeah, it's the end of democracy. I mean,
yes, exactly.
it's the end of democracy. But no, peaceful protesting in front of a Supreme Court justice's home, or harassing their children, or whatever, that's completely all right. But
right.
As long as you're on one side,
exactly.
no, it's. I think it's brutal, and I don't care what side it's on. I'm not picking a side in
right.
in the protesting part of it. I mean, if people want to protest in public and show that they're frustrated and stuff like that, as long as they're not inhibiting other people from doing or intimidating, But right. I can say for sure that anybody who's okay with, our Supreme Court is supposed to be it's not supposed to be. It is our third branch of government, right? I mean, it's supposed to, its entity itself should be impartial, and it's not supposed to be swayed by public opinion.
Right.
It's the one branch of government that is not supposed to be swayed by public opinion. But now all of a sudden it's okay for, and some people are just fine with the leak itself. And some people say, well, the ends justify the means because, these people are trying to destroy the rights of blah, 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 whatever the case may be. But I mean, I think any case, whether it be, Roe versus Wade or any other controversial topic, if we allow the mob to all of a sudden intimidate a branch of government in a way that will sway that opinion, I mean, we're in serious trouble because, I mean, I don't care whether it's somebody on the so-called right or so-called left or whatever. If you're out there to intimidate and strong arm a branch of government, whatever that branch of government is, we're in real trouble as a nation.
Yes. Okay. And to your point, I mean, that's all we hear. And again, too, I hate to kind of take sides, but I mean, when you see a pattern and you see a trend and you see this consistently coming from one side, it's hard not to call it out. But when you hear consistently from the left that they're destroying our democracy, which regardless, whatever, obviously we're not a democracy, and I hate a democracy, and I would not want to ever live in a democracy.
You and me both, brother.
Yeah, right?
There's no way.
Democracy is exactly mob rule. It's 51%, forcing their view on the other 49%. That's not
right. Yep. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. No, it's very, when they use the power of intimidation to make their point. I mean, I'm totally cool with getting in touch with your local politician.
Right.
Threatening your politician with your vote, saying,
Exactly.
"Look,
Yes.
this is my, I am part of your constituency. I
Yes.
am the person you're supposed to be representing. If you're not doing what I'm asking of you, I'm going to vote in a different way."
Right.
That's the way a representative republic is supposed to work.
Exactly. Yes.
That is the right way. That's the true and right way. And
Yes.
getting a group of people together to try and sway the opinion of a politician, not through force, but through public discourse and
Yes.
a meaningful public discourse, and trying to plead your case. That's what we are supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Standing outside the Supreme Court and slinging as much mud and hate and whatever as you possibly can, or getting up, with your bully pulpit as a politician, and using that bully pulpit to, sling ad hominem attacks and just the vile hyperbole
Yes.
that they do, and trying to discredit the court by whatever means necessary. I mean, that's not helpful, and
No.
I think it's unfortunate that I never thought in my lifetime I would see a time when this is the way that our country would be treated. So
Yeah, it's a terrifying direction, and I mean that's just it. Is even just as you said, obviously I come from the left, so most all my family is on the left, and they're all up in arms over this stuff. And again, I can understand it to an extent, and I'm not even for or against abortion. But when you look at what they actually did, the Supreme Court, all they did was kick it back to the states. Right.
I think that's the point that a lot of people are missing, Dan.
Yeah.
Is this isn't doing anything but righting a wrong that should have never been done in the first place.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I talk about it, and I want to talk a little bit about this too, but, I talk about it all the time in whether it be conversations I'm having in other platforms or whatever. Government does not create rights. Government does not have rights. Government has responsibilities.
Yep.
The government's responsibility is to protect the rights of the individual. They can't create rights out of thin air, which is what happened with Roe versus Wade. So basically, and any power that's not explicitly, provided to the government by the people needs to go back to the states and whatever. That's a whole nother conversation. But all this does is it codifies the rights of the states, the people closest to the individuals, to make that decision. And again, if the individual state and if the state legislatures and the politicians that are closest to the people want to make that decision and govern on a local level and say it's okay or say it's not okay or whatever, that is the way that we were supposed to work in the first place, not having an all-powerful central government in Washington, D.C., creating rights and taking away rights out of thin air. So the argument itself is just, in my opinion, is mind-numbingly stupid, because it should have never happened in the first place. And I think most people with a logical perspective on it would say the same thing. No matter what your thoughts and opinions are on abortion itself, which I'm not going to lie, my personal opinion on abortion has changed significantly from the time I was a young man in my teens and 20s to what it is now.
Yes, as mine.
And so, but that's neither here nor there. I just, like most things, don't want the federal government making up rights where they have no authority to make rights.
Right.
And I also don't want them, infringing upon the rights of anybody. So I don't want them making it legal by government fiat, and I don't want them making it illegal by government fiat. I want that decision, as I do with most things, to be, put back in the hands of the state legislatures, the people that are governing close to the individual, and allow that to happen. Just like my opinion on healthcare in general and public health. And I know I'd mentioned it briefly before when we talked, Dan, but it's just like my conversation. I'm involved in a project with Braver Angels, and who I consider a good friend now, Dr. Francis Collins, is, the former director of the National Institute of Health. He wanted to get out of that intellectual intelligentsia bubble of the Beltway DC mindset, right? So So he came to Braver Angels, and one of the conversations that him and I have been having, because him and I are in a kind of a truth and trust project now between, me, like redneck from the Midwest, blue collar, kind of not anywhere close to Beltway intelligentsia kind of mindset person, and then him, and so we've been having some incredible conversations. And my big thing, obviously, what him and I are talking a lot about is the government's response to the pandemic. And just like I've said to him, and I've said in conversations, and we were just part of a national debate here in the past couple of weeks. I think the government, I don't want the government making decisions for me when it comes to my healthcare. Right. One way or another, I don't. But the whole top-down model, everything governed from DC, is the furthest thing away. I want, if anything, I want my state and local officials, to make rules, and then I can actually petition them, the ones that are close to me,
right,
based on, good information. But I just don't like government mandates in general. People act as if this Roe versus Wade thing is going to lay down this mandate that all abortions are illegal, but it's not. That's not the case at all. It's bad information. It's bad information that people have been putting out. Just like with the pandemic, there was so much bad information and misinformation. Not all by the government, a lot by the media, a lot by the local, But the reality is so. Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation that I've been having. What do you got?
Yeah, no, it's just kind of funny how I think it just that kind of comes full circle with kind of the three topics that we've kind of been talking about, as far as initially with the importance of free speech with Twitter and Elon Musk, then to Roe v. Wade, and just the importance of, I think, just kind of, localized government, and how, to an extent, whatever, just kind of the my body, my choice, or whatever type argument that we'll want to hear. Full circle now to the pandemic, where the same people that are arguing against Roe v. Wade and, my body, my choice, are the same people that were forcing us to inject our families with the experimental vaccine, so it's just, and how and why then they used, the power of government to be able to silence any doctors or any physicians or anybody that would actually kind of stand up against them. And again, why we need free speech, so we can kind of have these important conversations, and again, take it to the most localized, whether it's again with our government or with our own doctors, the importance of being able to just have these conversations with our own doctors and being able to decide what is best as me as an individual, which they want to do away with. They want to be able to just mandate it down from Washington, and a one size fits all for everybody, and then, silence any debate or conversation around that. And it's both terrifying, but also too just kind of full circle as to the conversations we're having because of the direction we're going, because it is just it's terrifying, where we just, like you said, I just never would have thought in a million years I would be, and this is coming from somebody who's been fairly concerned with the direction we're heading, but I never still would have thought in my lifetime that both I would be forced to potentially take an injection that I wasn't wanting,
wasn't comfortable with, didn't want, for whatever reason. It doesn't matter, but
exactly, yes. And then those same people again would silence any debate or conversation on it, and then again too, within the same month, come back and say, my body, my choice. It's just like the hypocrisy and just the illogic, and just it's just mind-numbing as to just trying to wrap my head around just how loved ones, family, educated people cannot see what is going on, when this is all so overt and out in the open, where anybody should be able to see what's happening here. But
and to your point, to take that full circle, I mean, to tie in all of that, one of the biggest reasons Twitter became so embattled and started to struggle and everything else is because big tech played such a huge role in stifling the conversation, in disallowing people to speak their minds and talk about what they wanted to talk about. I mean, big tech has been one of the biggest contributors to the mistrust
Yes.
and loss of trust that we have in whether it be each other or our government or our public health officials like Dr. Collins and I are talking about. I mean, the reality is when you, and I've brought this up in these conversations as well, when you start to tell people what they can and can't talk about,
right?
Especially us in a country, we've been free. There's nobody in this country, for all intents and purposes, nobody in this country right now that wasn't born free. I mean, obviously we've got immigrants that have come here from other, third world hellhole kind of countries where they don't have the freedoms that we have. But for all of us that have been born here, we're born in the most free and freedom enhancing nation on the planet. Yes. When all of a sudden you have an environment like we've had in the past couple of years, where whether it be the government or big tech or the media or whatever, and they start to tell you what you can and cannot say, well, all of a sudden the bells and whistles start going off. They're like, yes. Wait a second. Why can't I speak to what I believe is true? And this is one thing that I talk about in these conversations is mandates are not the answer. A better argument is the answer to creating. Right. So stifling somebody's ability to say what they want to say, kind of like Twitter was doing pre-Musk era. And obviously he hasn't even taken over yet. So it's probably still happening. Not allowing people to say what they want to say doesn't help. And then trying to control the narrative as the media has done, giving one side of the story and then trying to disavow with ad hominem attacks the other side of the story. That doesn't help. And then government mandates forcing different things upon people which they are not comfortable with, instead of putting out the data in a reasonable way, and trying to use a better argument to change the conversation versus just not allowing the conversation.
Right.
I mean, all those things contribute to just a divisive and toxic environment that's going to perpetuate that hateful division that we're talking about.
Yep. And I'm trying to think, what is it as to if you don't allow for, unpopular conversation, then you lead to violent revolution or whatever. I can't remember how the saying goes exactly, but I mean, that's kind of to your point, is just, and it kind of, again, comes down to full circle for all this stuff. But I mean, when we're talking about the Supreme Court decision in that, just being able to kick it back to the states, which is just to open up the dialogue, to be able to have these laboratories of democracy. So that's how, when you have a free country of individuals, billions of individuals, that's the only way that we'll be able to kind of live together, that everybody has different agreements and different whatever opinions and stuff like that. But if we just are able to at least have a conversation, and at the end of the day be able to kind of agree to disagree, but ultimately the best way to kind of push back against bad ideas is to debate good ideas. And that's how
bring up better ideas.
Exactly. But when they don't even allow that conversation, then they don't leave any other option other than violent solutions. And that's, again, kind of what we're seeing in the direction we're heading. This is this is history repeating itself. We know these things. This is why we set it up the way we did, for a free country to be able to debate these issues and have these conversations. And it's worked so long up until the point where they started to stifle debate and conversation and opinions, and big tech got in and started just silencing and deplatforming a whole side of the argument. And then, of course, that leads to violence. And now we're heading in the direction. I mean, this is so predictable if you're willing to kind of see what they're pushing us towards. And unfortunately, a lot aren't. But hopefully conversations like this will at least open up some minds that, yes, we need more debate. We need more conversation. That's why free speech is so important. That's why we need to kick things back to the states, and states' rights are so important. So, there might not be somebody that agrees with this, but then they can, be able to vote with their feet or vote with their dollars, and be able to just, go where other people do agree with them. And that's how we all kind of live in peace, is not everybody's going to agree, and that's okay.
Right. Well, no, I think that's incredibly important what you say there, Dan, because the fact that each one of these states is supposed to be, a laboratory of democracy in and of itself, and
Right.
and each state should be able to make, for the most part, its own rules on how they want to govern themselves. Because again, like I've said before, those who govern the closest govern best.
Yep.
But the unfortunate thing is people think that, well, as long as I have the people in power that I want in power in Washington, and then we get them to do what we want them to do, we'll get it in place for everybody. And that's really not the case. And even to bring that to a more local level in a state in which you and I both live, in Minnesota, and this is part of the conversation that I've, a project that I'm working on with Dr. Collins too, I've brought up, just to bring it to a very local level for people in our state that are listening to this. Think about how our governor treated this pandemic, right? And instead of allowing counties to govern themselves and make their own decisions based on their local public health situation and everything, treated the whole state as if it was the city of Minneapolis, St. Paul. They could have confined the first 6 months of this pandemic and their nonsensical lockdowns and rules and things like that to that metro area, and done a lot more effectiveness and not destroyed the lives and livelihoods of so many people out of state. I mean, I had a conversation a few months back with a gal who's she's an ICU nurse in a hospital up in northern Minnesota, I believe. And she's like, yeah, we had to shut down our hospital and never saw a COVID patient for like the first 4 months of the pandemic. So there's all these people not getting their preventative care and not getting to do, not coming in to see their doctor and whatever for important stuff, or just avoiding the ICU or avoiding the hospital altogether because they didn't want to get this scary virus that nobody knew about. But nobody, nobody in outstate Minnesota saw anything going on for the first several months. And the same thing on a grander scale is the same thing with Washington, D.C. If people want to have everything governed by a small group of people in Washington, D.C., and the rest of the country has to live by that little subset of people and the dictates that they pass out to everybody else, we're in real trouble. I mean, that's literally the stuff that my nightmares are made out of, man.
Mine as well.
I don't want that.
No.
So talking about a little more local issues, did you see that the Daunte Wright story here in Minnesota?
Sure.
was a horrible thing, and we saw that Kim Potter, the Brooklyn Center police officer, where she had accidentally pulled her service weapon versus a taser, and Daunte Wright was a young man who was trying to flee police and got killed in the situation. Well, his mom's in the news again. I don't know if you saw this. I just saw the article this morning.
I did not know.
Yeah. Well, apparently there was a high risk arrest going on one of the highways here in central Minnesota. And she decided to take it upon herself to pull over on the highway and start filming the thing with her cell phone. And one of the kids that was getting arrested, obviously we've got crime running rampant here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and there's a lot of just ridiculous. I mean, the crime rate, the stuff that's going on around here is ridiculous. But so one of the kids that's getting arrested, I mean, they weren't resisting the way that her son unfortunately did, that led to his death. But, these guys are getting arrested. But she's standing up there. She stopped her car on the side of the highway and she's filming it with her phone and whatever, because she's, obviously got it in her mind that police are murderers instead of whatever. And the one kid says, I don't want my face on video. I don't want, can you go get her and get her out of here? So the cop goes over there and she obviously starts to resist and throw a fit, and you know who I am and whatever. And you can't tell me what to do. I'll sue you. You guys killed my son and blah, blah, blah. Wow. I mean, I feel for her. Obviously I feel for her because her son died, but the whole thing there is, what are your thoughts on that? I obviously haven't seen the story, but
Yeah, no, I mean, it's again, just unfortunately par for the course. And like you said, I feel horrible for her losing her son, especially in such a situation. And unfortunately, she's been indoctrinated into this camp of just that, young black males are being hunted down by cops. And, as in a interracial marriage with a black son, it's unfortunate because it's just, if we're able to just kind of have, again, a logical conversation around the actual numbers, I think they would. This is what really kind of drives me crazy. Is I see how they exploit people of color and exploit an ugly history to elicit a specific reaction to be able to push an agenda. And
exactly.
I find that very disgusting. Versus, again, I mean, me and my son, who is, again, a black male, but he's about to graduate with a criminal justice degree. He's interning for Roseville PD. He wants to get in law enforcement because he knows and understands the numbers behind it, the stats and data and facts actually behind it. That, again, his biggest threat isn't cops, that he's probably more likely to get struck down by lightning than get shot by a cop. But unfortunately, when you're being fed this narrative that you're being hunted down and you don't have somebody to bring in context and perspective around it, then you do actually think, you're being hunted down. And I can't blame the people that buy into that, because they are being told this 24/7. It's just being rammed down their throats 24/7. And again, if you don't have that perspective around it, I can see how you could be very angry and jaded. And again, take kind of that reaction that, you killed my son, a complete stranger that had absolutely nothing to do with it, but
right.
because he shares potentially a badge that looks like, the same one, she's going to, throw on that collective guilt onto an entire segment of society or entire industry of police enforcement, based on, again, a narrative that's completely false and not even close to reality, but that's just being pushed from, again, this establishment that's just desperate to divide us and spread hate and division. And unfortunately, it sounds like she's just falling for it, as unfortunately too many are.
Yeah, no, I think it's sad. I think anybody that pushes that narrative, I mean, it really comes down to, Dan, just what you said there is there's people out there that are pushing that narrative, and it contributes to the problem. I mean,
Yes.
when you convince a young black male or young person of color of any whatever,
Right.
that they are some kind of a victim and that the police are out to kill them, of course their guard is going to be up. Of course they're going to, maybe they're going to have that fight or flee response,
right.
rather than just comply and complain later.
Right.
As my friend Dion Joseph said in a former episode of the podcast. But so then those people, and of course those people that are making that claim are never held accountable.
Right.
They're never held accountable. But the reality is that narrative, spreading that narrative, is actually what gets, young black men or young people of color that are interacting with police killed. I mean, it yes. really does, because instead of them saying, oh, okay, well, if I comply, if I've done nothing wrong, I have to have enough faith in the system. If I've truly done nothing wrong, I'm going to comply and complain later.
Right.
And I mean, then there's like zero. I mean, statistically, with the number of interactions between, people of color and the police, statistically, there is no trend that people are being killed by police in any great numbers. So that's the first lie that comes about of it. But the reality is, if they use the comply and complain later versus the fight and flee mentality that's driven by those lies, then there's definitely zero.
Right.
I mean, the number is zero. So, there's nobody getting killed because they're complying with police and things are fine. So,
And that's just even just the direct violence of those direct interactions with the police. And then indirectly, what it causes is the defund the police type movement, which then leads to the violence and the theft and everything else that we're talking about, which again, disproportionately hits the low income areas, which disproportionately hits people of color. So it's like directly it hurts the people that it's supposed to be helping the most by, like you said, not having the right approach and how to deal with police, but indirectly it hurts them even more by causing more violence, by causing more death, by causing more murders, by causing more theft, by causing more everything. And that's what we're seeing here again, is it's such an obvious trend if you're willing to kind of follow it and see the logic and read the data and facts behind it. But unfortunately, we just have an establishment that just does everything to push that aside and just push the hate and push the division. And
that's just
people the most that they say they're trying to protect.
Right. And that's just it. And, instead of having the conversation, to take our whole conversation today full circle, there are outfits out there, there are outlets and things like that wouldn't even allow that part or this latest part of our conversation to even happen, because They say, well, if you're speaking out against this anti-cop narrative or not acknowledging that young blacks are being systematically killed by police officers, that's hate speech, and we're not going to allow it.
Right.
When the reality is the conversation really just needs to happen. And the thing that's going to save more lives than anything is knowledge. Going back to a conversation I had with my friend Daryl Davis on the Derate the Hate podcast, it's that ignorance is what causes the hate. Same thing. I don't care if it's the conversation about Roe versus Wade. I don't care if it's the conversation we were talking about Elon Musk purchasing Twitter and stuff like that. You have a bunch of people that really don't have any idea what they're talking about.
Right.
Listening to people that are driving a false narrative and building a hateful mindset because of misinformation and the inability to actually have a logical conversation on the topic. That ignorance causes hate. Hate causes anger. Anger leads to violence. And then that all leads to more ignorance and hate and violence. Ignorance, hate, violence. So, it's conversations like this that really do derate the hate. It's conversations like this that really tone it down. Absolutely. And I want to encourage everybody. I don't care if it's people in the United States or other parts of the world that listen to us or people right here where we live, where you and I live here in the state of Minnesota. It's so important that people realize silence is not violence. Right. Disagreement is not hate speech.
Right.
All cops are not bad.
Right.
Free speech is not a dog whistle for conservative right-wing, propaganda.
Yeah.
I had somebody say the other day, somebody was watching so you'll get a kick out of this. Somebody was watching the debate that I was in with Dr. Francis Collins and some other medical professionals the other night, and they saw this "We the People" flag up above my right shoulder, and they said, I don't know who that guy is with that "We the People" flag up above him, but it could just well be a Confederate flag. Hateful bigot. What? As soon as he started talking, I tuned out. I didn't want to listen to him anymore. And I'm just like, wow. But then he spent the rest of the night. What's that?
We the People.
We the People. Yeah, is now a dog whistle for hateful right wing extremists, which apparently in his mind I am. I'm going to venture a guess that he's never actually listened to the Derate the Hate podcast. Right. He probably has seen a few of my headlines and whatever, or seen a few of my comments online. He's trolled some of my sites before, but it's amazing how people. Going back to that conversation that I had with Daryl Davis, how can you hate me when you don't even know me?
Right.
It's such a powerful statement. And I think, conversations like this, with if people would just go back and listen to the kind of conversations that I have on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, I mean, whether it's people I agree with or not,
Right.
whether it's people of color or people like me who are obviously not a person of color, or having a conversation with you, like you said, you're in an interracial marriage, your children are people of color, and you live it, you know the reality,
Right.
And you have not raised your children to have that victim mindset.
No.
But once people do have that victim mindset, bad things really do start to happen.
Absolutely.
There are real life consequences for that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was when I really decided and knew I needed to get active, is just when I had seen the system, whether it was just the media or our public educational system, pushing that narrative onto my kids. Because my kids, whatever, proud father moment or whatever, but they were doing very well academically, socially, athletically, popular, have a lot of friends, white, black, and everything in between. And yet it's just horrifying to me that a system is so insistent on trying to teach and tell them that they're victims and oppressed when they're thriving. I mean, they're doing it so well. And that's where I started to really kind of see just how dangerous this narrative is. Because again, if you don't have that perspective, I can see just how you're handicapping an entire generation of youth by teaching them to be victims.
No doubt.
And yeah, I can't imagine what kind of a future that's going to hold for them other than just bitterness and angry and that's what we're seeing spill out into our streets now.
Convincing somebody they're a victim has never made anybody's life better. It just hasn't. Absolutely. Speaking of proud daddy moments, I did see that video you posted the other day of your daughter in doing her taekwondo. Yes. I think it's taekwondo, right? Taekwondo routine, and yeah, she's not going to be a victim. She's she's very impressive. That was an awesome little video. Thank you. Yeah, I loved it. That's awesome. I'm glad you posted that. That was so cool. So all right, man. This has been another great, incredible. I mean, just an absolutely incredible conversation. I can't wait for the next one. I mean, this kind of conversation is what needs to happen.
And we need more conversations like this. And I appreciate everything you're doing over there at Rate the Hate, because this is exactly what we need. And it's obviously putting you in contact with some pretty powerful people. And it sounds like, they're already even questioning some of their moves and admitting to some mistakes. And that's a huge step forward for all of us. So I appreciate everything you're doing with that as well.
I have been fortunate enough to be in some pretty great conversations, and there's definitely gonna be more of that to come. So, awesome. So yeah, definitely not going to want to give up on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, because there's a lot of great things coming down the pipe. More conversations with Dr. Francis Collins. I can say pretty confidently you and I are going to have more conversations. I love the collaboration and the work with FAIR Twin Cities and the people that I've talked to from FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. The work that I do with Braver Angels is certainly as important as anything that can be done. Braver Angels out there looking to better that better that discourse, now with their Braver Politics stuff and things like that. So there is so much good out there. There are so many people out there, Dan, that are actually trying to make the world a better place, trying to tone down that divide, whether it be political or social or racial or whatever. So people really just need to realize that it's not as some would have you think. Elon Musk is not the devil. He's not coming in. It remains to be seen, what he does. You and I, we express skepticism, obviously. You got a guy that's got $44 billion and he can just go buy something for $44 billion. I'm always going to be skeptical of that person. Yeah. The reality is just because somebody's got a bunch more money doesn't make them the devil. Right. Just because somebody's of a different race doesn't make them the devil. We got to be cognizant of those wedge issues. We've got to be cognizant of what we do and keep on having conversations like this. So thanks again, Dan. I greatly appreciate it, man.
Always a pleasure. Much appreciated.
Friends, all too often, the most nasty, the most divisive, the most toxic are those that have the loudest voice. They have the biggest microphone, they have the biggest audience. And I don't think it has to be that way. We can have civil conversations. Even civil conversations about divisive topics don't have to be divisive. So, look at episodes that I've done in the past with people with whom I agree not on many things, but we've had great conversations. We've had curious conversations, like with Monica Guzman and others that have been on the show. It doesn't have to be toxic. It doesn't have to be divisive. Don't let those trying to drive those wedge issues take up all that space and take up all the time. Friends, I just want to say again how very, very grateful that I am that you took the time to join me for another D-Rate the Hate podcast episode. Please share us with your friends, share us with your network. If you haven't done so already, subscribe and talk your friends into doing the same. Feedback and ratings, wherever you get your audio, always greatly appreciated. And with that, I will just say get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. Friends, if there was anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, I would love to hear about it. Email me, wilk@wilksworld.com, or hit me up on most social media platforms. With that, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.